John, are you on? Can you hear me?
I am, but I
Cannot hear you. Let's see here if we can get you.
how about now?
If I unplug the, try it now.
How's this?
That's much better.
Oh,
That's-
goody. You think
Yeah.
it's much better. Thank you very much.
You're welcome
very
much.
Taking over for John. I thought he sounded a little optimistic. I mean, I don't want someone operating on my symptoms in the morning and then running a meeting in the afternoon.
Yeah, it didn't appeal to me either.
I got to figure out how to turn this up.
Up. You mean in volume?
Yeah, I can barely hear you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's see here. Now, normally I see you inside the top of the Sunnyside Lift Shack on other Zoom meetings, but today you're not.
I've got a broken computer and I don't have the options. Uh-oh. Well, if I can't get out of full screen to turn this up. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Perfect.
Okay, good.
Is your wife swearing at me?
Is she swearing at you? Not this very moment.
Not this very moment. I couldn't answer her question. There's too many things happening at the last minute. It must be the last minute for something.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people.
Yeah. I see you have, like me, the COVID hairstyle.
Well,
where you don't go to the barber.
I'll fix it, but I want to fix it after the council meeting.
I see.
Nobody's here but me and you and probably Chris.
Okay, I don't see anybody else signed in.
Well, when it says Town of Alta, is that you, Town of Alta? Are you the host? No.
Well, I think Jen is actually signed up as the host.
Oh,
there's Chris.
Hey, where's your tie?
Yeah,
My tie, I did have a collar, but I wore like a woolen shirt, because I was going to go outside and talk to the contractors. It was kind of cold out, but it is never cool enough in this building for a woolen shirt. It is virtually always t-shirt weather in this building, at least by my, at least in my particular cubicle, it's usually really warm. So,
are you in the town office, Chris?
I am on Tuesdays. Yeah. Yep.
So you guys rotate through the office, and Tuesday's your day?
Yeah, Jen does 2 days a week because she has the most need to basically check the mail. She processes the checks that come in the mail. So Jen does 2 days a week, John does a day, Piper does a day, and I do a day. Which, as winter unfolds and skiing becomes something that is possible to do, I guess Jen doesn't go skiing that much though, so it's like.
Really? I thought she did a little every day.
Well, she probably goes as much as any of us should, which is quite a bit less than me personally. So I've never spent a winter in the valley, not one. I mean, I sleep down there, but I've never been down there during the day aside from when I broke my leg and I was down there for 6 weeks,
Yeah, but that's not really in the valley. That's in your living room. You never really see what the valley's like.
Yeah. I'm in my basement now, which is more akin to this building that I'm in at the moment.
So Roger's on, and before I can do a public apology, I kind of overslept last night. I turned up my phone. I wasn't ready for Chris to come and pick up checks this morning. Oh, Niermeyer's going to hear this confession too. So Chris caught me totally off guard this morning. It's like I should have gotten the checks, signed the checks, been ready at the door with fresh coffee. Hello, Jeffrey. You're muted.
Yeah, unmute Jeff.
Although not Niermeyer, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to mute
There we
people
are.
randomly?
I can mute people. Yeah.
I can remember a circumstance on television here a couple of weeks ago where a mute button would have been surely handy.
Did I get in trouble if I said, or a bazooka?
Yeah,
that's a
that would
little bit
work too. Okay, Jeff, we've got you from, there we go. Now we got the rest of you.
And Foy's happy, but he's also muted, but he's been dealing with sewer lines and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
So he's still
Hey.
smiling.
I did it for 25 years. There's nothing wrong with sewer lines.
If it's your own basement, it's a problem.
Yeah. I dealt with a lot of those. I remember one afternoon flooding, I think it was like 35 of them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Oh,
Well, then you got me topped. I told Rob the story about when the boathouse down by the creek just up from Hellgate. Our guy was walking by in the summer and he said he heard water and he knew nobody was in there. So he got a key and he went in and the sewer had overflowed and it was from the top down. And I told Rob there was a pool table in the basement. Water was up to the pool table and there were brown trout floating around by the top of the pool table. And I just thought, oh no. This is after an extensive remod. But the guy was very gracious.
yeah.
Yeah, that's when it always happens, is after somebody remodeled their basement.
Yeah.
Paid for a lot of remodels over the years.
Yes. Oh, you mean we did?
Or, no,
It
Salt
always
Lake City
gets
did.
shifted. It always gets shifted. All right, Christopher Colley, did you see McLean's?
Yes, I did.
Notice? Oh, good job. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know whether she wanted to, we needed her to be a part of the meeting today, so I guess I,
Oh, I'm sorry. She wasn't gonna be, and then at the last minute, she was able to come for an hour.
Oh. Did you guys see the waterfall behind me?
Yes.
Yes, where is that?
It's was the largest waterfall in Ecuador until the Chinese built a dam project, and they built a tunnel through this right side of it, and basically intercepted something, and so the waterfall created a new path and has since in the last year migrated upstream a little over 10 kilometers. Taken out the highway, 2 oil pipelines coming out of the Amazon basin,
Oh,
and really close to the dam that the Chinese built in exchange for the oil coming out of the Amazon basin.
oh boy. Oh,
So-
boy.
Man.
It's a major river. And so pretty interesting to see the power of nature, but it's going to take them, I'm not sure where it's going to stop. It'll hit the upslope of the Andes pretty soon.
Oh,
A quick timeout. Chris, can you link Mike Mon in from there? Mike Mon said he wants to figure out how to get in. Sorry. It's
Okay, I
just
see
amazing.
Dave has joined us, but he's still mute.
Good afternoon.
And invisible.
Yeah, now.
My
Yes,
favorite
Dave.
combination. I'd love to be muted and invisible.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
I don't know why my camera's not showing up, but
okay.
it's on.
And Polly's visible,
have you
but
got tape over the camera?
yeah,
No, it's a piece of paper that I slide back and forth, but yes, it's
Slide it the other way.
You're talking to?
Well, Dave, you popped up briefly. Hi, Polly.
Hi, how are you?
Hello
Good.
there.
I have to apologize in advance. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to get off this around 4 o'clock. So just a heads up, I'll just drop off when
you're not with us very long.
no.
Well, and she's gracious because that's my fault for setting this up when she couldn't be here. But are you doing hideout stuff? Is that the deal right now?
Oh my gosh, I'm doing hideout. I have another developer that is presenting something in front of the Summit County Planning Commission this afternoon.
Hopefully he doesn't have Bruce Baird as an opponent as well.
No,
Oh, you smiled. I
yeah.
love that guy, but
He has a lot to say. That's for
He
sure.
does. Bruce Baird is a relatively flamboyant land use attorney, very rarely for municipalities.
Well, he actually came out of Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a
You know,
lot.
That's where I knew Bruce. You know, he used to represent some of the things that we were doing.
Oh, good.
And then he went to the dark side.
I think it pays better. Or that's what he
Okay.
said at some of the conferences.
Now Jarrett is on the agenda for, what's the plan on his joining us?
Okay, so the deal, normally we do this at 3, but the mayor really wanted to participate with the NEAD thing, and he can't make it till 4, which is almost perfect because Polly wanted to really talk about dark skies. So we can listen to Mike for a little bit, and then we can talk about dark skies for a little bit. And then by then we will have hopefully stalled until 4 and we can see what's happening with the community center.
So
Okay,
is
so you
Nepstead
expect,
joining us?
Pardon me?
Is Nepstead coming?
no.
Oh, I'm
No.
sorry.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, John.
Oh, so John Nepstead, the other day, when I set this up about a week or so ago, John said he's having minor septum surgery, but he doesn't see any problem with still doing the meeting. And I just thought, ooh, I don't even like the sound of that. I don't want to go to the meeting just listening to that. But he texted Roger or emailed Roger a little while ago and said, yeah, I'm kind of beat up. Could you run the meeting? He's out of commission.
Okay.
So
Okay, so here we are. So
He's out.
let's officially begin the meeting at whatever time it is.
3:36.
3:37. Yes. And welcome to the Alta Planning Commission meeting of September 8th, 2020. Slightly delayed. First on our agenda is minutes from our July 28th meeting. Does anyone have any comments or suggestions or corrections to those minutes?
Just a point of order. Do you need to read the language that we're
Oh,
basically doing a
oh.
virtual?
Yes, thank you.
Who does that?
You do.
The chair.
Okay. The Planning Commission Chair hereby determines that conducting a meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location pursuant to Utah Code Section 52-4-2074 and Resolution 2020-R-12. The chair relies upon the facts put forth by the mayor in his August 3rd, 2020 determination. Attendees can watch the meeting on YouTube via a link that will be posted on the town's website at the start of the meeting. Is that adequate, Polly?
Sorry. Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, let's then proceed to the minutes. Any comments or suggestions or corrections to the meeting?
I'll
the
make
minute.
a motion that we approve the minutes of our last meeting.
Oh, can I say one thing?
And I second. Go ahead.
Yeah, the discussion. John, you want to say
Oh,
something?
okay, sorry. I forget the order since I'm never really involved in this. But, and throughout, our transcriber wrote John Nepstead as John. And if we could just change that to Jon, they'd be perfect.
Okay, it was moved by Jeff and seconded by
Rob.
Rob to accept the minutes with, I believe, with those corrections of John Nepstead's spelling. Any other comments? So all in favor?
I
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed. The minutes are accepted. Dave Abraham, we have a static picture of you.
I'm going to drop out and join back up, Roger. See if that gets my camera going.
Okay,
Is that all right?
sure.
It looks like we got Mike Mon, so can we get
Mon,
him
we have Mike?
to the front?
We do.
Yes.
And he's smiling.
Is that Mike with a hat on?
Yes.
All right, okay. Hard to recognize people here. All right, well, let's go to update on activities from the Alta Ski Lift Company. Mike? Carry forth.
Thank you. It's been a while since I've seen all your faces.
Yes, indeed.
Amazing what a pandemic's done to us. We at the March 14th was kind of the end of the world as we knew it at that point in time last spring, when within a few hours all of the ski areas in the western United States pretty much had terminated their operations due to the pandemic outbreak. We shut down and tried to take care of our employees and get them on their way. Fortunately, about over 75% of our visits had occurred, and so we ended up. We're happy to say that for last season we didn't end up losing money, but we didn't really make any money either. But it was. We were pleased that we were able to get through the season and kind of cover our expenses. And then we had actually started both the Alps project and the Albion parking lot project the summer before. And, our mode of operation here with our board is that we don't start any projects unless we have the resources to pay for them in advance. And so we were able to go into this summer with those two major projects to wrap up. So it took it 2 years for us to really complete the construction for Alps. They're supposed to be done on October 1st this year. They're kind of down to their punch lists and such. I still think they have a couple of weeks worth of work and cleanup and things to do in that building. So they're working through that. We're fortunate actually that it's coming online. As we've looked at things from the pandemic standpoint, we have to reduce all of our food service capabilities to meet the requirements of the physical distancing for tables and such. And so just did the calculation today, and we're going to be, let's see, what was it? Came in at close to, I think our total the net was about 54% is going to be our restaurant capacity this year of normal. And that's with the expansion of Alps. Alps actually would have dropped to about 33% of its normal capacity without the expansion. With the expansion, we were able to move its capacity closer up to 60% of normal. But so it was timely to have that expansion happening at this point in time. But that building is looking good, and hopefully it will be ready to go. We'll have a little revegetation work to do outside of it next spring, but other than that, it should be complete. That's there. The Albion parking lot project, we had started that 2 summers ago. When we'd started it, we ran into a little snag with the Army Corps of Engineers. They designated the willows on the south side of the lot up on the slope as being a jurisdictional wetland. Didn't meet the requirements of the criteria to meet a wetland, but they have that jurisdiction that if water's running through an area and there's some plants there, they can basically designate it as a wetland, and they did so. And so we altered that project, didn't widen the parking lot as much up there, but did take the grade out. But we were able then to expand the project into widening the lot between between the Albion Grill and the Cat Shop. And that was completed early this year. We took all that fill. We ended up with a lot of excess fill by altering the project. And we were able to take some of the grade out of the Sunnyside Pitch 1, which is the last pitch when you come down into where the Albion Grill is. It's usually a steep pitch. It's been problematic early season for a lot of our beginner skiers. They'll take it really slow, and then they end up having to walk quite a ways on their with their skis to try to get back to where they can get on the Sunnyside lift. So we used that extra fill there, filled that in, and that will make it so that it's a little bit wider now and more of a grade that's acceptable for the beginner level skier. So early season, that will be a significant improvement for there. We also tackled, we got approval from the Forest Service to do a major terrain project on Supreme, off the Supreme lift. That two parts to it. One part of it was the taking the Devil's Castle Road, which doesn't have, the grade isn't enough at the top and too much at the bottom, and it's narrow. We were able to widen the road, make it about twice as wide, and make it a more consistent 9% grade all the way through. So the bottom of the Devil's Castle Road now is about 12 feet higher than it used to be. The top of the Devil's Castle Road now has been lowered. We completed that part of the project this summer, as well as down at Grand Junction, the transition from Sleepy Hollow into Grand Junction, if you know what I'm talking about, had a old washed out eroded culvert that had went by its way, and it was kind of a nasty little dip and hard for us to navigate in the early season. We needed a lot more to push that in and fill that in. We were able to put a culvert in there and make that, so we'll be able to bring that area online a little sooner. The other part of the project that wasn't done this summer, which we may or may not be able to get to next summer, is Sleepy Hollow itself. Between number 9 and Challenger is what we call the erosion gullies. And we have approval from the Forest Service to go in there, take some of the steepness out of the top of that pitch, and put some more, make it more a consistent pitch and fill one of those gullies in so that we can have a groomed run, another groomed run from the top of the mountain down through there and come down and meet with Grand Junction.
Great.
Run that we can groom and not have to have it closed due to an avalanche potential danger above the Devil's Castle Road. And another part of that project is off of Big Dipper. Part of that is taking some of the Big Dipper knob out and filling in what we call Rock Gully, which is between Big Dipper and over to the lower half of Rock and Roll. As you know, is it Rock and Roll? Yeah. Yes. No, it's not Rock and Roll. Is it Rock and Roll?
Mhm.
Yeah, it is Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
So rock and Roll, get all mixed up. So the top half of Rock and Roll often is closed due to avalanche danger. And so until we get to continue the control work. And so this will enable us to have a path for skiers to actually go out, ski that bottom part of Rock and Roll, and with that still have the upper part closed. So those are that part of the project, the rock dipper fill in into Rock and Roll, and the erosion gully section we have approval to do that and have the final plans approved. It's just a matter now of having the resources and the time to do that. We had noted that with the change of what we've noted happening on our mountain is that corkscrew has become challenging for a lot of lower intermediate skiers. And we've, for years, trying to determine how do we deal with this issue of helping them get off the mountain. We got a fair amount of feedback from low intermediate skiers who have said they've stopped coming to the column sides of the mountain because of corkscrew as the way to get off. And some of them have pleaded for us to put the old Wildcat cat track back into play. We have avoided doing that because of the number of injuries that we were having and that transition there. That was one of the reasons it was taken offline. So we currently have in works with the Forest Service a project to widen corkscrew a little bit more. We didn't, for budgetary reasons, when we were doing corkscrew the first time, we stopped about 30 feet. We could have went 30 feet wider at the narrowest point and had chose not to do that. And so we had resubmitted to the Forest Service to try to widen corkscrew, as well as take out the hump between Nina's and Shush, and then take some of the steepness out of the bottom of Nina's and Shush. So it's not such an abrupt transition. It comes down quite steep and then has kind of a flatter transition to make that a little bit more of a skier-friendly transition, particularly early season. That project is in the Forest Service process of trying to get approved. And we would probably give that a higher priority over doing the erosion gullies if we had that approved for next summer and if we have the resources. do that. That's kind of in the works. That's out there. The other thing that we have put on the table is, as you may be aware of, is the popularity of backcountry skiing continues to explode here along the Wasatch Front. And it's now began to negatively impact ski area operations in that we've been losing as much as 200 parking spots on busy days to backcountry skiers. And it hasn't been an issue until all of a sudden we're full and we have to turn away people, and we've turned away hundreds of people. We figure that in the last 2 years, we've turned away at least $250,000 worth of business on days that if we would have had those parking spots available, rather than having to turn them away, they could have been used for ski area patrons. And we've had capacity on the mountain and not been able to fill it because there has been no parking. So it's part of the longer term, UDOT's going through this EIS process of which we're participating in trying to solve the parking transportation dilemma for a longer term. But in the short term, after we get out of COVID, we need to deal with this issue. We've been meeting with the Forest Service, the town of Alta, as well as some of the backcountry groups to try to find a solution. Our current solution that we're proposing is just starting to have some discussion and drawing out some plans that we would have reviewed with the Forest Service, would be to make some modifications to our current parking lots to offset the parking that's being used by the backcountry community until a longer term transportation solutions can be put into play. We're looking specifically at the Flagstaff lot between the Rustler Lodge and the Alta Lodge, of squaring that up, and out to the to the south, how it is up for the Rustler, we have that point that kind of teardrops out and then it cuts back in. But we would square that up, add some spots, square up the Wildcat lot a little bit, and then a little modification in the Grizzly lot. Those modifications would add about 220 parking spots, is what we're kind of trying to shoot for, that range. We figure if we add that, we can continue to support the backcountry community coming and using some of the parking spots that they do, and then we've replaced them in another place that allows us to move forward. And then down the road, a longer term transportation solution should address that. We like the spot between the Alta Lodge and the Flagstaff lot between the Alta Lodge and the Rustler, because that is also across the street, which will be from this new community center that we're going to be talking about today. So that could become parking that's available for those that come to visit the community center also. That kind of has a dual purpose that we're looking at in that realm. And we would look at potentially being able to use the material that would be need to be moved for the community center to use as the fill on the opposite side of the road, which would be beneficial for that project, and just go across the road and not have to truck material far away to find material from other places. So that's kind of out there in the works. Those are as far as projects that we're looking to add to the immediate future, potentially that parking lot project, a corkscrew project, the work on Supreme, and then we're starting to try to figure out what do we do in the Albion base. The Albion lift needs to be replaced or removed, and so we're starting to look at our design there as what do we need to do there. Starting some preliminary planning, but it's a ways out as to before we would be able to do something over there. We have, shovel ready. We have the Supreme project we could go to. I think if we had our preference, we would if we got the parking lot project far enough along. I don't know if we can, and that between now and next summer, it will take more time, I think, to get the necessary approvals. But we would probably tackle that project first, and corkscrew would be our second priority, and then over to the erosion gullies on Supreme would be our third. We also have approval from the Forest Service to put a snow fencing above the Devil's Castle Road on the tail end of it, so that we don't have to shoot that with an avalauncher, as well as install 3 Veasan towers on the East Castle, so that we would be able to do avalanche control on the East Castle with the Veasan towers, is similar to the way that UDOT plans to do those in this upper Little Cottonwood Canyon. They installed 10 of those Veasan towers above the town of Alta, this summer, which will be used, which will change a little bit the way control work will be done here in the canyon. They'll be able to shoot those, do it much quicker than doing shots all the way across the town. So it should speed up the work. Still, we still have to shoot the mid canyon, so that doesn't change that part of the equation that's down there. So those are kind of the things that we have kind of been going on in the ski area this summer, the work we've been doing, as well as kind of some of our plans looking towards the future. We do have we have done some preliminary work on maybe adding some additional seating at Watson Shelter. But that's very, very preliminary. We haven't gone much further to do actual much more than kind of conceptual design at this point in time. That and probably the Albion base, the lift configuration over there are things that are further out. As we look at this coming season, the big question initial question was, are you going to open the ski area? Well, yes, we are. What's our plan anyway? We hope to. We're trying to work through all of the regulations. The ski industry got together early, spent months trying to develop a base plan for the industry as a whole that we could apply across the ski industry that then would be tailored to the specific local requirements and guidelines. And they came out with what's called the Ski Well, Be Well playbook. It has several basic principles or guideline, foundational principles that we're trying to do across the board. We're recognizing first that, the skiing is an outdoor sport. It's outside, and a lot of the ski experience has some natural advantages over other venues. It's a lot different than going to like Lagoon or to other events downtown. So we're outdoors, we're skiing, we're naturally spaced. When you're riding a chairlift, there's a breeze, blowing in your face. So some of those natural advantages we're trying to take advantage of. But the basic principles of the Ski Well, Be Well plan is that first is we're going to require everyone that comes to the ski area while they're in maze lines, riding lifts, or in any of our buildings to wear a face covering. So that's going to be a mandatory requirement of all employees and all guests, except if they're inside a building eating and drinking, of course, they don't have to wear their face covering then. We are physical distancing. Skiing as itself has some natural physical distancing, but with the face mask, and then we will, in our maze lines, we will be using ghost lanes, empty lanes in between the lanes. Tip to tail seems to give us natural about 6 foot distancing, but side to side, groups of people grouped up in maze lines. We're going to use some ghost lanes to try to keep some spacing there. We'll be eliminating the single line, and we'll allow guests to self-group. We're not going to try to fill every chair to capacity. We'll allow the skiers to decide who they're comfortable, they'll ride with their party. Preferably, we're going to encourage ski with load the lift with the party that you traveled with. But if there are people that are comfortable riding together on a lift, they can. And if they are not, and they want to ride single, then that will be acceptable. Enhanced cleaning and sanitation, disinfection procedures will be in place. You'll see we'll do a lot more of that, a lot more frequently. Our pinch points are, as I mentioned, our indoor spaces, our restaurants. Going from only have about 50%, 4% of our normal capacity to do all the necessary spacing. And it's a little challenging for us to figure out, how do we allow people to use our restroom facilities and keep them appropriately spaced and keep them not necessarily mixing with those that are there trying to have a meal, because we've got to kind of allow both functions to be happening at the same time. So based on looking at we're adding a few things to with addition to the ALFs coming on with some additional seating on the lower level of ALFs, we're opening a coffee shop. And so an outdoor kind of grab and go little coffee shop that's down there. We're looking at having waffles and some other coffee and some other things that you can get down there. There will be a little seating down there. We're looking at the Collins Grill. We'll make Baldy Brews an outdoor, accessible only grab and go. Similar situation over there. You won't go in the building to order and get food out of Baldy Brews. It will be an outdoor venue. We are looking at having a food trailer in the Wildcat lot where people can grab and go coffee and burritos and things like that, and encourage them to go use their car as shelter and a place to eat their lunch. And the Albion Grill, we'll have Alta Java still, but Albion Grill will have a kind of a grab and go option too, where people will be able to place an order, get some food and take it and eat it in their car if they'd like to also. Trying to take advantage of people being able to use their car as maybe their locker room and a place to eat lunch if they're not comfortable eating in our food facilities, or if they are full. So after we've analyzed all of that and tried to figure that out, we figure that our capacity on any given day, maximum capacity is probably going to be 70 to 75% normal. Conditions will impact that one way or another. If we're on man-made snow only when we open, it will be a lot less than that. And so to be able to manage that capacity, we've looked at a variety of things, from reservation systems to controlling, reservations for parking or reservations for tickets, and they all have their challenges. And, when we look at the various ways that people buy tickets and come here, and we have this direct to lift ticketing system and passes, we've recognized that, the thing that our most limiting factor we have here that limits us even before COVID is parking. And so we're looking at parking being the means that we will use to control our volume this year. We recognize UTA's reducing its service to 20 people per bus right now under orange phase, which is a third of their normal capacity. A lot of our employee carpooling, shuttles, and van pooling is going away, just to keep employees distance. We're going to have more employees driving, more guests will be driving. We're hearing more of guests choosing to drive to the canyon to come stay in the lodging rather than fly and shuttle in. So then the other thing that we're seeing is backcountry equipment sales are up 600% in Salt Lake Valley. So we hear a lot more interest. We anticipate a lot more people will be wanting to go into the backcountry and consume even more parking. So our current plan will be is we'll plan our parking strategy to park and accommodate about 70% of our volume. That we can do that by spacing cars farther apart when they're parking, using fewer rows, opening up bigger lanes to travel in our parking lots. We don't see that being an issue for us to be able to park the number of cars that would be appropriate for any given day on the mountain. Our challenge is going to be is we want people to not come up the canyon when we're full with parking. And so we're working closely with Snowbird and UDOT and others to be able to communicate better to guests. We're encouraging all of our pass holders. We'll have a page on alta.com that will indicate, what is our parking status. And we're encouraging everyone before you leave your house to look and see where are we at on parking. It's kind of like we want to give an estimate that says, hey, we think parking will be full by this time, this day. And we'd encourage them to study that. And then we're working with UDOT on having real lifetime counters of how many cars are coming up the canyon. So we know if my parking lot guys say, hey, we have 150 spots left that we're willing to park, that we have a good idea of how many cars are in the canyon and can get the word out in advance. And so that we don't have people that drive up and then get turned around or angry because they feel like they have a right to come and ski and we're turning them away. So it's a work in progress. We'll learn a lot in the first few weeks. Fortunately, we don't anticipate it being a significant issue until we get to the Christmas holidays. And that's when we'll first time it will really be stretched and tested. We've went back and analyzed our data, and if we're at a 70% target for a number of people here, we have about 25 to 30 days in a year historically when we go over that 75% limit. And so that that all may change because we do believe there will be more demand than there is capacity this year, as was reflected this summer. We saw in our canyons everywhere, just many, many more people in the canyons. On the summer road, going up in the Albion Basin, I think we traditionally were in the 12,000 cars in the summer, and we were up in, I think we made, we were significantly more than that, about 50% more cars. I may not have the numbers just right, but it was about 50% more cars this season that went up into Albion Basin this summer. We anticipate there will be a lot more pressure. We're trying, our commitment to the Alta community and as well as to the Alta skiers is to try to keep people informed of what's going on, be transparent, do everything we can do to minimize the spread of the virus. We recognize we cannot prevent its spread, short of not operating the ski area. And our current operating plans put us in the position we believe that we have a good chance of maybe breaking even at that level of business. So that's our goal, is to be able to try to cover our costs, take care of our employees, and really make it till next year about this time. That's really the focus, is to try to stay sustainable to then so that we can be ready and be able to go into a season next year in a healthy condition. That's kind of my recap. Questions?
Yeah.
I got a question, Mike. Rob Voigt. Are you selling tickets at the resort?
Yes.
I mean, are ticket sales going to be happening at the resort?
Yes.
And is that a possibility in the future of controlling parking if you had ticket sales off property, and people driving up and wanted to come down into the parking lot would have to show their pass or their season's pass in order to park in the Wildcat or Albion lot? Is that even possible?
That was one of the things. It's one of the methods that some skiers are trying to choose to control their volume, is making everyone buy a ticket in advance. And some of the feedback we had from our lodging properties here is they wanted to know, would their guests be guaranteed a ticket? It's kind of a little, when 1,200 people a day come from the properties in the town of Alta, they are not, they don't know what kind of volume they're going to have for sure, and it varies from time to time. So it's a complicated formula to be able to put all those pieces together and hit that just right, and selling tickets. And so we've chosen that, and then you look at the canyon. Do they have the right equipment? I mean, if it's just because they bought equipment, they bought a ticket, they may not be able to get here on their given day. They may not have the right, might be snowing, they may not have four-wheel drive, whatever it may be. And so we've recognized that a big part of one of the challenges of skiing at Alta is getting to Alta on certain times and certain conditions. And so if they can get here and we are able to park them, we'd like to accommodate them. We really don't want to be in a position to turn people around and send them back down the canyon. That's caused some consternation for some guests because they'd said, well, I'd really like to know that if I'm coming to Alta that I have a ticket for sure and you'll let me in. And, you know, we said it's really not much different than other seasons in that when we're full on parking, regardless of whether you had a ticket, a season pass or whatever. So we've chosen to not limit those sales. We'll watch those models. We'll watch how that works. But the other thing that you have to realize is the highest yielding ticket I sell is at the ticket window. I get more per customer out of the guest that comes to ticket window than I do out of someone that's bought a discounted ticket somewhere else in advance or even a season pass holder. So it's kind of you're trying to balance it, trying to figure out how to make it all work.
All right, thank you.
Roger, do you have a
I have
question?
some questions too, Mike. This idea of expanding the Flagstaff lot between Rustler and Alta Lodge, as you know, it's kind of awkward to get back up to that area with your skis on your shoulder. Would you expect to build a lift there, or would you expect people to get bused from either of the basis areas, or how would you accommodate that?
We would be working with the Rustler Lodge probably on enhancing or improving their lift, to be able to get people back up to there.
Okay.
We would have to work through that and figure that out. That's part of the equation that's there. Yeah.
And the other thing, there is residence parking up here too, and of course you're reducing the amount of parking totally, which is going to squeeze the residents even further who are already in trouble. Do you have any thoughts on accommodating that?
It's a discussion that the town and the ski area need to, and UDOT need to have. We've had some discussion about maybe there needs to be permits for overnight parking in certain spots that have been designated as doing such. We haven't made much progress on that, but it's definitely a discussion that needs to be had. And, you know, it's kind of evolved over time. And as you know, it's worked. We've made it work for many years, but the last few years, there hasn't been enough parking to accommodate everybody that wanted to park, with the increase of people coming not only to the backcountry community, but it seems like there's been an increase in the number of people that want to park overnight within the town. So those are issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah. And I suspect, I'll not put words in your mouth, that you probably are going to have to make some changes in these operations as time goes on. Do you have any kind of triggers set for that, or are you just going to play it as whatever cards fall on the table?
We have one of the things that was, you know, we've been in contact with skiers in the Southern Hemisphere, as well as skiers that had summer operations all summer long, and just trying to understand what's worked, what hasn't worked. And it's been interesting, you know, the protocols in Australia are significantly different than the protocols in the United States. But the thing that the message from everyone is, you make your best guess, your best plan, and be ready to change it after the first week. You know, we went out and visited with Lagoon, and Lagoon opened with, you just have to wear a face mask to get into the park, and then everyone was going to be socially distanced, waiting in lines and on rides. And they found that people don't do what you ask them to do. And, you know, and we saw the same thing at Snowbird and others, is despite how much you signed and how many dots you put on the ground for people to stay socially distant, physically distanced, people were not very good at it and seemed to ignore it. And so they had quickly changed their plan and went to face masks required and kind of eliminated the social distancing component because it wasn't working. And that was accepted by the health department and seemed to work. We're hoping, you know, our plan is to have the combination of both and to try with both of those in place. And we're hoping that people have become more sensitive and accustomed to staying physically distanced. And part of that will be forced by, you know, ghost lanes and things that they just can't get closer than that 6 feet. but there's places they can, in lines that we still have places that there'll be people lining up, and we're just going to have to work with it. And you know, we're trying to keep it simple and things that people can do and understand and support. And then we'll have to adjust and adapt as it goes on.
You know, with respect to the completion of Alta, I saw a indicator of that today because the fencing went down
Yeah.
the road this morning. So,
Yeah. In close.
yeah. Okay, questions from anybody else, Jeff, or?
Nope, I'm good,
Okay.
thanks. Thank you, Mike, for the update.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the update, Mike.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, indeed, thank you. And I note that both you, John, and I have what I call the pandemic haircut.
I always have the pandemic haircut.
That is lack of one.
What does it get?
Okay, there's no further questions of Mike. Let's move on to the dark skies piece.
Although, if I could suggest, I'd be
Sure.
happy to talk about this, but we have these people from New York, which is 2 hours later, and probably, well, not a third of their staff, but a good part of their staff waiting.
Okay,
If we,
let's go with that.
yes, thank you.
Thanks, John. John, how much time do we have?
2 hours. No
2
more,
hours,
no
all
less.
right.
Well, what
All
was
right.
like? You were like 20, 25 minutes with the,
Okay.
the same as the council.
Okay,
Now you've
perfect.
got more information, so it could be a little longer.
Okay. All right, thanks. Great, good to see everyone. Thanks for having us here. My name is Jared Pelletier. I'm with Enniad Architects in New York. Joining me today is both Elodie Graham and Don Weinrich, who are on the phone as well. Let me share my screen and we can get started. All right, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Excellent. So what we thought we could do today is just share with you our progress. This was our progress from the last time we were supposed to meet, and the meeting was unfortunately canceled due to weather. So we're sharing with you that material, but we'll quickly get you up to speed in terms of where we are with the feasibility study. What we thought we could do is just highlight the process that we've gone through, share with you where we've arrived with our advisory committee relative to the program and size and scale of the potential building, and walk you through some of the primary spaces that we've designed with our through the community engagement process and through our conversations with the advisory committee, and then share with you where we're going next. So if you recall, I think the last time that we spoke in July, we had been working through a community engagement process where, unfortunately, because where we're at in the world, we're all doing this remotely, but I think quite positive, a lot of great turnout, and I think a lot of really good engagement and really good conversations. We did those in sort of three buckets, I'll call them, with sort of looking at a really sort of broad engagement. We had a website called altacommunitycenter.com so that we could really garner a lot of thoughts and opinions from people very, very broadly. And then we worked with our advisory committee to come up with a list of about 100 people who we reached out to directly and invited to a series of what we called small group virtual workshops, where we tried to select folks from different perspectives, homeowners, people who work in the town, at the lodges, school teacher, people who support the community in different ways, to have more sort of intimate conversations and to really hear their opinions and thoughts about the aspiration for a community center and what types of programs they think would be valuable for the group to consider. We then carried out a series of what we called sort of virtual open workshops, where we took the themes that we heard, the sort of broad themes about gathering, about trailhead, about education, and we created sort of focus workshops based in each of those broad focus groups to drill down into a little bit more specifically how those spaces might function, how they might be sized, and how they might support the activities of the community in different ways. So that all helped us really kind of determine with our advisory group a functional space program, which is the basis of our feasibility study, and I'll share with you the results of that. But first, I think it might be helpful to hear a little bit about the folks that we talked to. Elodie, are you there? You mind explaining this?
So we heard from 95 different people throughout the process, and like Jared said, it was important to have these multiple tiers of engagement that would catch different voices. So for example, our website was able to give us more insight into people that were visitors to the town of Alta, and our small group dialogues were more people that lived or worked in Alta all year round or seasonally. So in the end, the breakdown of responses that we got was 59% people who live or work in Alta year round, 22% who live or work in Alta seasonally, and 19% who are visitors or others. And we think that this is a breakdown that can give us insight into all of the different stakeholders and users that will be engaging with the building.
Yeah, thanks. And we've even started to see some kind of international pings on our website. We ran analytics recently. So that's great. We think we hope you feel the same, but we feel like the engagement process was really good and really helpful to form where the feasibility study has landed. One of the things that we've crafted, hearing all of this great input from the various stakeholders, we worked with the advisory committee to craft a series of guiding principle statements. And that's really to make sure that as we're continue to think about the community center, think about how the community and everyone sort of came together to define the aspiration for the place, so that as the building process picks back up after this feasibility study is issued and things move forward, we can all remember what the kind of vision was for this place. So I'll read these to you. I think they're pretty broad, but I think it have impacted the way that we've been thinking about the center in terms of the programming and the designs. The first one was really the community center is a resource where the community will gather for the well-being of its members. So that's really multivalent. We talked about a lot of ways that gathering is helpful for people, especially in these times. And in addition to all of the great programs that ACE runs, things like more simple things like just having a place to come together and grab a coffee, or have a place to gather more informally, let's say, or even a place for to meet with someone or talk to someone about a kind of personal matter, or to get away, or to have a kind of rentable office space. So it's all about well-being. It's there for the community to be better, and to help them. The other thing that came out of a lot of our conversations was the idea that the community center needed to tell the story of Alta, and a complex story, not just a kind of simple story, which is sort of broad, both include history, but also ecology, to educate about how to protect and preserve the environment, and about the ongoing of town. Subsequently, we've had some really great conversations with the Alta Historical Society, which I can share with you what those conversations came up with. In addition, the last two are probably no-brainers, but I think worthwhile mentioning. One, the center has to be financially sustainable. It can't be a burden on its community. And it also needs to be an exemplar of environmental stewardship, all of those things that go beyond the human into preserving the landscape in perpetuity. So as we started to take all of those aspirations and ideas that we heard from the community and work with our advisory committee to come up with a functional space program for the building. The way we started this was actually in reverse. We sort of looked at all of the components of the building that we must have, that a building of this size and scale really needs to have to function correctly. So you can see here in this kind of pie chart, we have broken it into about a third of the space that's must-haves. Those are things like mechanical spaces, electrical spaces, small loading facility, janitorial space, a facilities workshop, things that support the running of the place and the management of the place. There are things that we determined with the advisory committee, which we put in this bucket called need. Those are things that, baseline the building needed to have to perform its function. And we lumped things like the office space for non-for-profits in there. So that's something that we needed to have. We also included in there things like the post office, an education space for ACE programs, the town reading room, and the town school. So those were all functions that we grouped in the need category. And then the rest of this pie, 54%, were all aspirationally driven based on things that we heard. And those are really functions like a large multi-purpose hall. And those are one of the spaces we'll take you through today. A large gathering lounge, a place for people to come together, a small retail outlet, coffee shop, all of the kind of other pieces that go into making this a really vibrant place that's inviting to everyone. Included on those is a trailhead, kind of functional issue, exhibition space, both for a small changing exhibit space, but also to integrate some of the artifacts and things from the Alta Historical Society. And then also just more general common space that we know that we need to support a building of this size, things like a lobby, things like restrooms, and things like circulation. So all in all, that program with everything that we were able to come up with and through our conversations with folks in the community, we came up with a functional space, 19,000 gross square feet. And I think that was in the range of what we were expecting. I think we were expecting something between 10 and 20,000 square feet. So we think that this really represents kind of full ask. And certainly as the project moves forward, those layers could be peeled back if there were other needs or other desires. The way that we started to think about how this building then could function and could be organized was by taking each of those programmatic pieces and pulling them together and talking with our advisory committee about what the experience of the place might be. So you can see here's the bubble diagram. It's just a tool that we often use to try to describe sequence and adjacency, because those things are important as we start to develop spaces. So we imagine very simply, you come in the front door and you're in the lobby. We talk a bit about the lobby needs to have certain things. It needs to have a place for information. It needs to feel welcoming. It needs to be the kind of nexus of circulation. So we've sort of grouped some functions around that lobby that we sort of are trying to create a kind of central hub for the community center. So those functions are coffee and retail space, the central lounge space, the post office, which we understand is where a lot of people are moving in and out and coming to. And then embedded within that, we've been thinking about how we can incorporate components of the Alta Historical Society's collection and exhibits to make the space feel uniquely of Alta. So off of that central space, We have multi-purpose and educational spaces off to one side, and then support spaces off to the other. And then this is sort of done generically. As we get into the design process, we can actually lay out where each of those spaces might be, and how they might be adjacent. But there's a common space you go into, and then off of that common space, there are many choices for you. If you're coming there for a pre-programmed event, or if you're there to use the facility at your leisure. We've also started to think a little bit about how things like the Alta School might function. Maybe the Alta School needs to have access to an outdoor space for the kids for recess, or potentially needs to have a secondary entrance. The trailhead needs to be in a certain position in the site, needs to have access from the outdoors. So those are kind of layers of adjacency that we begin to think about as we're trying to organize the building. Certainly all of the support functions, things like the non-for-profit offices, and the maintenance and management facilities in the building, the restrooms, all need to be accessed off of there. I failed to mention earlier, but one of the other needs that we've located in the functional space program were a small studio apartment for the building manager, the building caretaker, and then a 2-bedroom apartment for the police force. One of the other conversations that we've had with the advisory committee was thinking about how this building could be sufficient, and that means sort of staffing it lightly and thinking about who's in the building on a daily basis and how could they spread their arms very wide, so that there doesn't need to be a lot of staff to run this building. So we talked about a full-time caretaker. That person is really maintaining the facility, keeping it up, dealing with all of those sort of more functional issues. And there's probably another full-time staff, which is someone who has a position that probably flexes, probably lives generally in the lobby area, but could man the post office, could also man the help desk and information space, could also be someone who helps with the scheduling for some of the larger event functions like the multi-purpose hall and education spaces. And then obviously the retail outlet is a little bit of its own animal. Depending on where that develops, it'll need to have its own staffing pro forma. But we're thinking to try to keep this, fairly modest and fairly minimal in terms of its burden on full-time staff. In addition, certainly the non-for-profits space, there will have people there on a day-to-day basis who will be in the building. And then definitely the school during school season will have people in the building on a daily basis. What I wanted to do was just share with you some of the kind of vision of some of those primary spaces of the building. And these are done very conceptually. They're not super specific, but they're intended to give you a sense of scale, but also a kind of sense of how that space might feel and how it might function. So the first space we calling the community hub for now, but is really this kind of lounge space, which is both the building entrance, the building lobby, a common lounge, a place to grab a coffee, a place to grab your mail, a place to meet your friends or your colleagues. So this is really the kind of, we think, the sort of life and the heart of the community center. We talked about, wouldn't it be great if this space has great views down the canyon? Wouldn't it be great if, incorporated within this lounge, we could include some small collections cases, so you could see sort of sprinkled within that space some of the collections from the Alta Historical Society. We talked about an idea for an digital information board that is a place you could come to understand weather forecast, what the condition of the slopes are, all of that kind of information that could be programmed, that could change daily, but becomes a repository for visitors. And then potentially a place to start to begin to tell in a more interactive way, a kind of a digital history of the town. And right in the front here, we've thought about this idea of a information desk, and whether that's a kind of manned reception desk, or it's simply a place that if you're from some other place that you come to get some information about where to go, or how to sort of guide your stay in Alta. So just in terms of scale, this is something that we talked a lot about. How big does it need to be? How many people does it need to support? What is the scale and the size of the cafe space? What is the scale and the size of the post office? Just making sure that we've got a kind of a right fit. But here, that was a kind of vision, the heart for the community center. And we even did a little sort of visualization, again, not so specifically that this is what it would look like, but just to give folks a sense of the scale and the feeling of what it would be like. You can start to see here, the entrance behind you, the cafe off to the side, kind of low, soft seating, sprinkled within that space, some collection storage and display space, kind of flanking either side. One of the activities we did with ACE was to actually post the idea of this hub to our website, and Sarah Gibbs was really wonderful in posting it to social media to get some ideas about how to name this space. These kind of great community spaces really need a good name, one that really lasts. So this was just a kind of brainstorming activity to think about, how could we name it? What's the story here? And we got tons of visits and tons of interest. And I think it was really great to see how many people were interested in, and they sort of ranged from, donor ideas to, things like the hearth. So I think we talked about the need for, eventually if this project moves forward, a kind of need for a fundraising and donor campaign. So we might need to think about that in tandem, but we wanted to sort of kind of brainstorm creatively with the community about what this place, what it could be and what it could be named. The other space I wanted to share with you tonight was a sort of large component of the community center, was envisioned to be a sort of large scale multi-purpose event space. The idea here is to create one large open space that could be subdivided with either drop down or folding partitions so that it's super flexible, so that there could be a range of functions and a range of programs. You could open the walls up and it could have a really large gathering, or it could be broken into 3 smaller components. You could see here, we started to think about, how could we divide the space up to support a large function as well as 2 smaller functions. Here, it's simply shown as a kind of lecture format with 180 seats in the middle, flanked by either side could be a sort of conference setup. Here could be more of a kind of casual setup with ping pong tables and lounge seating. So trying to design a space that could really suit, I think, both all of ACE's needs and their functions, but could also be an income generator for the community center, a place for it to be able to support things like conferences or feature lecture panel conversations. So just thinking about how that space might be super flexible. One of the ideas that we talked about was, especially given the times that we're in, certainly seeing a seating plan like this where everyone's really packed together is not exactly what you want. So just thinking about how could these spaces be really flexible to support, if God forbid we have to do social distancing in the future in the same way or in a similar way. So we're thinking about, maybe the back wall of this room is glazed, so you have access to daylight, access to views, so it doesn't feel confined. Certainly all of the furniture needs to be flexible to support different kinds of arrangements. Here we're just thinking about, the scale and size, if it was broken into different compartments, or if it was all opened up, what's the kind of maximum scale of event you could host here. So usually when we do that, we look at it as a lecture with stacked seating, because they're sort of, you can fit people closest together. So here that's getting us about 375 people, which is a large event. And then if you took that same space and then applied some social distancing, commonly accepted distance practices, you get that number down to about 65. So just to give you a sense of the the flexibility and the kind of broad range of use that space could have. Some of the other spaces that we've sort of determined and kind of right-sized with the group were a dedicated education space, mostly for ACE programs. That's sort of organized like a flexible classroom space. We talked about the need for all of these spaces to have a robust AV infrastructure to support web, video conferencing and remote learning. We talked about the need for potentially a separate fitness area for some of ACE's yoga and aerobics programs that might not be well suited to the multi-purpose room for cleanliness reasons. So here we've sort of organized a space that's about 1,200 square feet. Just in terms of context, this 1,200 square feet is about the size of Our Lady of Snows. We've been using that as a comparison. So we think about how, what the scale of each of these spaces is relative to something that's known in the town. The other idea we talked about with Sarah is a teaching kitchen and thinking about how that could both support a lot of her community cooking programs, but also how it could support as a prep space for the multi-purpose room and other functions there to really give you a kind of broad range of uses. We talked about a couple different models of this prep kitchen, whether it was kind of full service, we're cooking French fries and fried chicken, or if it's kind of you're bringing in more prepackaged, and this is more of a prep area. And that's the route that we went with, a kind of more compact, less intensive, but a little bit more flexible. The group thought for this type of use. And then the Alta School, we've talked a lot with Nikki about what her needs are for a potential classroom space. And here you can see, just in terms of the size and scale, similarly to some of those other spaces, about 1,200 square feet. So that is, again, about the footprint, a little bit smaller of Our Lady of Snows. For flexible learning space, for storage, we talked about the need for a small area off to the side where, if some of the older kids, younger kids, needed to be doing something different while she was teaching a different age group, that this could be a place that they could have other activities. Need for a kitchen. We also talked about the desire for some outdoor space for some outdoor programs and recess. We also talked about this kind of interesting synergy between the Alta School and the reading room, how they wanted to be located very near each other, and then that the school could help support the reading room and help staff it, and then the kids could get the use of that sort of immediately. So I think the conversations in our advisory group have been really great to determine, how can we make the best out of the least, and how can we really create synergies between all these different programs. Here's a sense for what that reading room might start to look like. We talked about space for books, obviously, storage, a common table for kind of more drop-in use, but also the need for some workstations, some computer workstations. The other interesting component to the program that we determined was a office space. We're calling this sort of non-for-profit office kind of suite. And we've been thinking about who is a kind of full-time occupant, and we've tried to right-size the offices to support those different uses, whether it's ACE or Friends of Alta or the Alta Historical Society. We've also talked about the desire and need for what we call flex offices, which are really to support a broad range of activities. They could be for other non-for-profits who might want to come and collaborate for the day and work on different kinds of proposals. They could also be sort of rented out. They could be a revenue stream if you, if you needed a quiet office space for a few hours. It could also be a space that you could book for a kind of an appointment, let's say, or a kind of mental health visit, or if you wanted to have an appointment with the town office, but wanted to come down the hill I think there's a lot of different ways. We talked a lot about how these flex offices could support a lot of different functions beyond just the kind of immediate needs of the people who might be there day to day. And then adjacent to those offices, we're thinking about a small conference space and been gathering all of the storage information for the different not-for-profits that would need to be stored on site to support their use. One of the great conversations we had with the Alta Historical Society was about, how could the building tell the story, the complex story of the town in all of its multivalent layers beyond simply a display in the common lounge. And we talked about a kind of art program that could be woven throughout the building. So not really exhibits per se, but a kind of curated art program, so that as in all the different areas of the building, from the school to the education center to the offices, they could start to be themed and they could tell different stories. They could be different photographs from different times that talked about the mining history of the town, or the skiing history, or avalanche mitigation, or geology, or the environment. There's so many things that we could think about, but wanted to make sure that there could be this sort of comprehensive storytelling that wasn't that could be that would enable you to discover something new every time you came. We thought that was quite a nice idea. And again, these are just conceptual ideas. I think as the project would move forward, all of the details would need to be flushed out. But I think having the kind of interweaving between the various functions of the buildings and an art program based around the town made a lot of sense. And then we also wanted to think about, in terms of the programming of the building, I mentioned before how could it support all of the great activities that need to happen there and still be functional in these kinds of times. So we started to list and curate all the different ways that we think a community center could still support the community, during our sort of pandemic time, with different components. The ones that we know about, the ones that we don't know about. Thinking about natural ventilation, having the ability to open the windows, thinking about having ventilation systems that have a high degree of filtration. Thinking about the building's design to have outdoor spaces so that there could be programs that are run outdoors as well as indoors, just to make sure that it's really flexible and is really usable throughout the year. We talked about making sure that furniture is always flexible so that it could be reorganized to suit however you need, and then technology to support remote programs as needed. And then one thing we're trying to understand a little bit more is about if there needs to be sort of medical equipment on site, just to have there as a resource. Just a couple more slides and then I'll open it up. I'll stop talking soon. One of the other sort of functional criteria for the building on that site is parking. And we've thought a lot about how to design the building to support parking. And our kind of current idea is to think about actually raising the community center up about 12 feet off of the level of the street there, so that you could maintain parking below the community center. And the nice thing that it does is it actually gets a lot of the gathering spaces up and gives you better views out and across the highway. So we think it's a sort of twofold kind of win-win. We're able to get an entire footprint of the building as parking. And our target is to be able to maintain the amount of parking spaces that are there currently, which currently we've mapped out at about 54. So that's our sort of minimum benchmark, plus whoever would need to be housed in the building on a day-to-day basis. So we're trying to target around 60 spaces. Depending on how the building gets configured, we think that there's a good chance we can get between 60 and 75 spaces. The other sort of imperative on the site, as you know, the site's in an avalanche path. And we've been working very closely with the Contour Group, who's been advising us and our structural engineers both on the loading requirements for the avalanche paths, but also the strategies for how the building can respond to the avalanche. So they've been a really great partner for us. We've certainly learned a lot through our collaboration with them, and hopefully will continue to be. And they're, I think, in the process of working through their own report, which I think they're going to issue in a few weeks, hopefully. They've gone out and done more detailed analysis on the site, understanding the topography and the slopes, and really mapping all and understanding the complexities of the types of avalanches that would, and the frequency that our site could be would be impacted. So you can see here, this is kind of one of their maps and how our site sort of intersects that. So they'll be publishing that, but I think one of the other things that's sort of forced us to think about is in the design of the center is what are the different ways that we could support a community center and still manage these really high level complex forces, and are there different ways to do that? So the design approach that we've taken, and we'll share more with you about later, is to think about what are the different ways we can manage the avalanche, meet the aspiration and function of the community center, and where does that how much do those things cost, and how much environmental impact do they have? We understand what the common sort of accepted way of dealing with a building in an avalanche path is sort of big concrete walls that resist direct force. One of the things that we've been thinking about with the Contour Group and our engineers are there other ways to manage it in addition to resisting it? Could we deflect it? Could we avoid it? Could we go under it? Could we go over it? Those are all the kind of ideas that we've been thinking about. And in our report, what we wanted to offer was a range of thinking and a range of ideas supported by a kind of rough order of magnitude cost. So we're coming up with 4 different ideas. We've worked with our construction manager friends, Big D, and they've been advising us about constructability issues and cost issues. So we're hoping to be able to present to the advisory committee a range of ideas, a range of costs, and then also think about how the building could have a range of impacts on the environment. We understand preserving the environment is incredibly important for the vision of this building. So we want to be able to also give you kind of range of dials in terms of sustainability. What is a code compliant building versus what does it mean to go better than code versus what does it mean to go all the way to something that could be net zero and net carbon, so that when we issue the report and the project moves forward into a fundraising process, you've really got all the tools to be able to make the community center reach its aspirations. So one of the things I'm kind of excited to share, we have scheduled a community design dialogue this Thursday where we hope to share with everyone more of these design ideas specifically. We've come up with several design concepts. We're going to be presenting alongside the Contour Group, who's going to present some of their analysis and their findings. And we're excited to present that to the community and get feedback. And then our hope is to work with the advisory committee to select a concept that can be used as the basis of design as the project moves forward into the future. And one of the things that we're hoping to do with our construction manager counterparts is to do a robust cost analysis of that design. So we're going to do more detailed drawings, more detailed analysis, and build together a more robust cost estimate so that as the project moves into a fundraising phase, you have a kind of realistic, reasonable sense of what it would take to meet this building in terms of its vision and aspiration. So that's the process we're working forward. So really the next steps for us are our community design dialogue on Thursday. We're going to meet probably a couple more times with our advisory committee. And then we're going to come up with a report. That report will get submitted to the town for review. We'll take comments. We're also simultaneously going to be soliciting the construction manager for some cost feedback and an estimate. That's all going to get rolled up into, with all of the comments and feedback and cost estimations, into a final report, which we hope to issue around the end of November. And then with any luck, we'll be able to move the project forward more actively into a kind of fundraising mode. So that's where we are, and that's what we had to share tonight. I apologize for going on so long, but with that, I'd like to open up to any questions or thoughts from anyone.
Yeah, this is Jeff, and I guess what I didn't see in your report, although you talked a little bit about it in the last few slides, is are you looking at a specific sort of LEEDs rating for the building?
That's a great question. So what we were hoping to do is be able to, in the feasibility study, be able to give you a kind of menu of where you could go. So meaning, here's what it would cost to build an energy code compliant building. Here's what it would cost to do 20% better than code, which would get you to a LEED silver or a LEED gold. Here's what it would cost if you wanted to take that even further and become net zero or LEED platinum. So we're trying to give you a range of options and give you a kind of almost an itemized list of what that would mean to reach each of those options, so that as the project moves forward, then you could really go through a process of saying, well, I think the right level of ambition for cost is really, targeting LEED gold, something like that, because there's always different. It's always a complex cost value proposition. The more sustainable it is, the more it costs, and the more it potentially costs to maintain, depending on how you design it. Right. So we wanted to make sure that you've got all of the options, and we were looking at that both from the perspective of energy, but also thinking about water systems. How could we, what are the different benchmarks? How could you achieve each of those water benchmarks? What are the different kind of embodied carbon benchmarks? How could you think about reducing the carbon footprint of the building? And then the other aspect, I've actually got one more slide in here. I think, oh no, I took it out. Was thinking about the kind of building's resiliency, and what would the building need to support itself, if you were without power or without gas, and what's the time frame that the building would need to function, if there was an avalanche event or if there was an earthquake. So factoring out all of those components, those will all be issued in the report.
Great, thank you.
You mind looking at the program page again?
Sure, you bet. Apologize, it's tiny text. There we go.
Can you explain how you get first, what's the difference between a need and a must?
Sure. So the way that we approached it for the conversation with the advisory committee was, must-have were functional requirements like mechanical space, electrical space, a loading component, janitorial component, building management, building facilities. Those are things that the building needs to function. We determined there were conversations that it also needed to have, if there was going to be a building manager, there needed to be housing to support that manager. And then in conversations with the town, we determined that the building also had to have an apartment for the police force. So that's what we exactly. That's what we put in the must-have.
Where does that value 2850 come from? I don't see that here except for one. I think that's a coincidence for exhibition, but I was trying
to... no, that should be more closely aligned with this number down here.
Okay.
This 2660. These numbers might have fluctuated a little bit since I've updated the slide. And then the need component, what we determined were those aspects of the community center that the advisory committee felt strongly needed to sort of to function as a baseline, meaning it needed to have the non-for-profit space, their office space. It needed to have space for the Alta school. It needed to have the post office. It needed to have the reading room. So those were sort of components that we kind of that the group didn't want to leave up to chance and wanted to make sure landed there. So you can see that should be represented here in the blue. I apologize if my numbers are a little off. Those are really these components.
Thanks for going through that.
No problem. And then the rest of it is really all of this program up here, all of the must-have. I'm sorry, all of the would-like, which is really getting into the multi-purpose, the wellness yoga space, the education space, the trailhead, the exhibition space, the gathering space. Those were what we call the kind of would-like.
I don't get some of the numbers here, Jarrett. 11%, 35% is 3 times essentially 11%, and yet 2850 is only 40%
right.
more than 2100.
You're right.
And these 3 things, 10,000, 3,000, 2,000, don't add up to 19,000. There's something I don't get.
Yeah, I think our math is a little off. We've been sort of massaging the table here, and I think my pie chart has been suffering from not getting updated.
Got it. Okay.
But we can reissue that for you. But in broad strokes, Roger, we were saying that about 50%, is in would-like. So, in broad strokes, that's about half of this number. And then the remaining 50% is broken into must-have and need. So it kind of bifurcates in that way, very in broad strokes. But I understand.
Jared, are the numbers in the pie chart NSF and the total is
Nope.
GSF? It's all GSF.
Nope. It's all GSF. Yeah, we wanted to have a GSF number.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because of the scale of the building, it didn't make sense to us to do an NSF with an efficiency factor.
One of the principles that were stated early was, I don't think I have the words exactly as you said them, but financial feasibility or financially sustainable. There we go.
Yep.
And I haven't gotten out of this how that is attained.
I think the thinking was that the center needed to be able to support itself through the revenue that it could generate, meaning the cost of the staffing and the cost of the maintenance could be offset through revenue generated by things like the conference center, or renting out other space, or subleasing the retail space. That was the intention of the statement, is that there was a kind of intentional blending of the programmatic spaces that both required funds, and then other funds that could potentially generate funds to offset that.
Yeah, and at least in the discussions that I've been a participant in, the kind of calculation of the pro forma that's going to support the building on an annual basis it has a number of components. There's potentially debt service if a loan is taken out. There's cost of basic operations, there's maintenance and so forth, and staffing on the cost side. And then on the revenue side, something has to pay all those bills. So how the town would like to approach achieving a balanced budget for this facility, we think it's an important consideration, certainly. Some of it might be offset by rental income. Sorry, hang on a second. Some of it might be offset by rental income and so forth. Some might be subsidized through some other means, which we're not privy to. So we have made a recommendation to the advisory group that an income pro forma be developed to address precisely this question, so that the leaders of the town understand how a facility like this hits the town's bottom line. I think I just add one other parenthetical, which is that developing an operating pro forma wasn't part of our scope, but we're working with the rest of the team that's collaborating with us from the town that you know, to assist in this development, to answer your question.
Yeah,
Any
one
other-
other question I
yeah.
had. When you talked about the 95 people in small groups, and you aggregated live or work, 59% lived or work year round. Could you disaggregate that into live or work?
Elodie, do you think that's something we can do?
Yeah, it's something we can do and get back to you with that number.
Okay.
Yeah, we could take a look at that, Roger.
And 22, the 22 obviously too.
Yeah, sure.
No problem.
Okay, any other questions of these people? Where it's
What are we doing, time?
7 o'clock there? Well, if not,
All right.
thank you very much.
All right.
At
Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
You're
Have a good
welcome.
night, all. All right.
All right.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Bye. So that was done. Okay, John, I think we have a couple of items left on the agenda. One is the dark skies, which actually a lot has happened since our last meeting on that, and it would be great to get a update.
Okay, and I'll do this quickly because I think the mayor has to leave in about 5 minutes. I told him I could do this in 3 minutes, so I'll try.
Well, before Harris leaves, Harris, you want to make any remarks?
Oh, I'm sorry, I said that too. It's like, if he's got anything, we could do the dark skies later.
Along which lines, Roger? Do you have?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I thought I'd capture you before you leave.
I am glad to have been working with Inuit. I've seen that presentation before, so I didn't really have any questions about it, but I think they've been thoughtful partners on this project. I know that I came in from I was teaching a class. I came in when Mike was talking about parking. As he knows, I've got some questions about, I'd like to see some documentation about how many parking spots are really needed and why that's the right number that he was talking about. But those are the only comments I've got about those two topics.
Okay. I just wanted to capture you before you checked out. All right, so let's go back to John and dark skies.
Okay, a very quick update. I mean, there are good things happening. I did get in touch thanks to Aubrey Nelson, what's her name? Aubrey Larson, who was at our October meeting a year ago when we met and looked at the lights in the sky in the dark after dinner at the Snowpine. She hooked me up with Daniel Mendoza at the University of Utah's Metropolitan Planning Department. They have a dark sky miner. The university also has a good engineering department, and one of the engineers who designs drones for the Department of Defense designed a special drone just for this dark sky miner department. And this drone is a programmable drone. They have said that they will give us 4 spots. They program in the 4 spots in the drone, they let it loose. It will take a picture and measure the light from ground level, then go up and measure the light from above, go on to the next 2 or 3 places and then return back. So they'll use this drone to do a preliminary assessment of Alta. And then they'll give us a write-up on that. And they're partnering with the Salt Lake Science Educational SLCSE. It's kind of a Title I Brainiac school on the northwest side of the valley, northwest of Salt Lake City. They're working with these students as well as the dark sky engineering department, dark sky minor and the engineering department. And one of the things they want to do is give us a preliminary assessment. They're also going to do a mural. They said they've hired some local muralists. These guys are going to volunteer their own time. And they were going to produce a mural that showed the east side of Salt Lake City and what the lights look like at night, the west side of Salt Lake City and what the lights look at night on this mural. And now they're very jazzed up to be able to add east side, west side, and Alta. So thank you, Harris. We talked a little bit about this. They wanted $2,000 or $3,000, and we're going to figure out a way to give them $2,000 out of our budget. They'll do the study. We're donating money for the canvas and the art supplies, and then drone work and maintenance. But they're going to do this at the end of October or the beginning of November. And then they'll generate a report, and then they will close up for the semester. And we're looking at doing a full assessment with the dark sky minors, graduate students in the spring. So our initial assessment will be starting. We've got a good partnership deal going with the University of Utah right now. We're contributing some money to help offset some of their costs. And I mean, we're moving forward. It's great. Now, in talking to Aubrey Christensen, one of the things she gave me a lot of material on dark skies and what other places are doing. And I sent you all a copy of it's a non-binding resolution that comes from the International Dark Sky Association. It's just a model. It's non-binding. And I just not a formal agenda item, but if you don't mind, I would love to work with Polly, with your blessing, and put this to the town council. John Nipshead said this best, I think, last time. He said, just a shot across the bow for everybody in Alta. It's like, hey, we're looking at dark skies. Some of the lights are a little bit obnoxious. Some of the lights trespass onto the neighbors. We're hearing more and more about it. So we're thinking about going dark skies. We're also starting the kinder, gentler hand approach, which will be easier to do after this initial assessment, saying, hey, here's what you turn up as through this assessment. Here are some things you can do to fix it on your own. But by the way, we're also looking at doing ordinances like Torrey, Ketchum, Grand County. So if it would be all right with you, just a little nudge or a nod of approval that Polly and I would work on this non-binding resolution to show to and present to the council at some point in the future. So I blew by that a little faster than I wanted to. Any questions? I mean, the good news is we've got a good partner with the U. We're going to look at an initial assessment, and it's happening in a couple of weeks.
Well, my reaction is that this is great to have this partner. And it sounds like that's, they have a fantastic tool for working this, but centered around Halloween is probably the darkest time we have here in terms of people and lights and so forth. I mean, I'd really like to see it when there's a lot of snow on the ground and there's a lot of people in town. And that would be more representative of the, that end of the lighting intensity.
So if we pushed it off, would it be better the last weekend, Halloween, or would it be better the second? They being the University of Utah, they need to have a project pretty much completed by just after Thanksgiving. So we might get the second week of November. Would that be better than October?
I can't say. I don't know. Maybe somebody else here could speculate on that. I mean, what I'd really like to do is have them come back during the week of Christmas, New Year's.
We could talk about that. I will talk about that with Daniel. He did say he did want to come back in the winter
Okay,
because
well, that's good.
just like you, Roger, he said, because it's going to be totally different. A light that is not offensive in the summer, if it's your neighbor and you have 10 feet of snow, all of a sudden you're blinded.
That's
at
right.
midnight.
Yep.
So
It might it might return a pretty nice baseline of the darkest that we ever get. So
Yeah,
if
that-
depending on,
That's a good point, Harris. Is it be helpful to have that baseline?
I'm going to have to go. I have an obligation at 5:15. So I'll see you
Okay.
all.
thank you for joining.
Thanks, John. I think that's terrific what you've come up with there.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you later.
Okay.
So, okay, I'll talk to Daniel and try and figure out when the best time is. Now, another thing, he said they would ultimately like to do a good installation as a baseline. Well, I'm not sure what we have except maybe our street light, and I'd hate to waste one of our 4 spots on our street light. But if we
Yeah.
do street light, snow pine, and Mike, I was hoping it would be okay if we did like the Wildcat base. And then where else? I mean, it's definitely snow pine because we get calls on that. Wildcat base.
To do both.
I've talked about that. Want
to do both base areas?
I think
Yeah, Albion.
that'd be fantastic.
We can go ahead and look at those. I mean, that some of the challenges we have are, we do run snowcats all night. They create light, and when snowmaking's running, there's light on all of those snowmaking devices.
Right.
But other than that, when we look at buildings and those type of structures, there's no reason why we can't do things to reduce light as long as we have adequate light for security.
Bingo. Yep. There's a lot of expensive equipment up there that people had said, turn those lights off. It's like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work because there's a lot of strange people around nowadays, and you got to have some kind of lighting, but then motion activated lighting. There's a lot of options, but okay. So if I can talk them out of not doing our street light, which is now dark sky compliant, the town has modified all of our lights, street light, water building, post office, Alta Central, town office. They're now all dark sky compliant fixtures. I'd hate to waste a fly site if we only get 4 on our street light.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know, we could look around Sugar Plum, Blackjack area, but it looks like we've got 4 spots. I'll talk with Daniel and see when the best time is. And if you have any ideas, I mean, they're looking at the last weekend of October or the first weekend in November. And think about it. If we could push it back to the second weekend in November, I don't know if that would be better or not.
I think those are all equivalent. I mean, they're basically all times when there are very few people here.
So we could note that. But there are some places that don't turn their lights off.
Yes, I know.
We're going to catch that one. But it'll be a nice baseline.
So John, are you going to nudge this along to the town council, or are you going to wait for the results from the drones, or what?
Well, I think at this point, a little of both. We'll start talking about this non-binding resolution, just so that it's something we're thinking about, because people are talking about this. But in the meantime, I don't think we can do anything really until we get this, first the initial assessment, and then the university would really like to come back and do a full assessment in the spring. And that's every building. Every location. And that's what I think it would take to become dark sky certified, but we might not need that. So we'll know more as we go along, but the initial assessment is the best thing, is the best place to start. And so a little bit of nudge and a little bit of waiting.
Yeah, and I'm comfortable, if you want to work with Polly to modify this International Dark Sky Association non-binding resolution. But my comments are is, we've been talking about, taking kind of the gentler, direct approach, and the way this, model is written is it directs, the council directs this town staff to come back with an ordinance, and I'm not sure we're quite there yet.
First part, I would definitely change.
Yeah.
We could look into an ordinance.
Right. So if you make it more, the friendly approach that we've discussed, with the opportunity of, evaluating the value of an ordinance as opposed to directing the staff to come back with an ordinance.
Right. Yeah, that part I do not like. And that part would not have stayed in there, but so thank you.
So
I agree. Yeah.
I would make the motion, Roger, if it's appropriate, to give John the authority to work with Polly to come back with a model that is specific to Alta instead of Townsville.
I kind of like that Townsville, though. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure it's kind of like, I'm sure there's a horror movie out there that has that in there.
Okay, any objections to?
None.
All right, can we take his motion by acclamation?
Yep.
You need a second?
Formal anyway.
I'll second the motion.
Say again, Dave?
I will second the motion.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 None opposed, motion passes. Anything else on the dark sky topic?
I don't think so.
New business. Anybody have any new business? Covered quite a bit actually here.
Yeah, just whether or not Mike's got the, snow report for the winter.
Not yet. Not quite yet. Please.
Well, all I can tell you is it's mighty dry right now, but we are seeing kind of a bumper crop of acorns in the lower canyon, and the elk are still in their rut, going a little longer. I don't have a pika report though. Last time when those three things lined up, we had a great winter, but
Right.
I don't have the pika nest report yet.
Well, when, there's a La Nina that's developing, and when people have asked me what that means for this area, I'd say, well, it might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less, and it might be the same.
That's right. That's right.
So,
Well, I can tell you that looking out the window, there's snow in Gunsight.
well,
We want that snow to melt.
Yeah, right.
We want that to melt and have it all hold off till about November.
late January's lunch if it doesn't.
Yeah, let's keep it dry. It can rain, but let's keep it not a lot of snow on the ground till November 1st, and then let's open the heavens then.
Okay, any other new business? How about a date for next meeting? John, you're usually the one who sets that.
I'm not thinking it. I don't know what we have on the books right now that's pressing for another meeting. We
Well,
can think about that.
my thought is if we have some data from this dark sky drone and associated things, be sure need to hear about that, say in late January.
Oh, I was thinking in the next 2 months.
Oh, okay.
Definitely. I love that suggestion.
I agree.
I'd love that agreement.
Yep.
Perfect.
Any thoughts on that?
No, I think works for me, unless, you can always schedule a meeting if something comes up that we need to address.
Right. And if you feel if something comes up with you and you want to get together and meet and talk about anything, any of you, anytime, same thing. Call me and we'll get a phone tree going and schedule a meeting. And likewise with any ad, anything you think of after we leave here, You can email them. You can weigh in on their, well, I guess their website is more just a survey, but you can call Jarrett directly and put in any suggestions or comments as they're working along, because they did put this off. They're going to have another meeting Thursday night from 5 to 7, a community meeting. They've sent out, Chris is going to send out a lot of notifications to people that normally get the monthly newsletter. The advisory committee came up with 120 some contacts with emails that any had should talk to. They've also met some other people along the way that have been communicating with them. So they're going to do one more big community meeting, and they're not going to probably be finished with this until the end of October. So anything you think of, throw it in their mix, please.
Great.
All right, before we adjourn, any other further thoughts or something we missed here?
Nope.
If not, let's have a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
All right,
I'll-
there's Rob.
I'll second it.
There's Jeff. All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 All right, thank you
Very
for.
good. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Take
See
care.
ya.
See you, Mike.